JP, you want to kick us off and just go however it goes, right?
Yeah.
Would you like this? Could you start, Kurt? I think
I
30 and
I
30, 30, 30 and 30 sounds good to me.
can, definitely.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Good to see you, buddy. Well, God, this is great, man. Some of the faces here, really, I should say all the faces, but that's not true. There's some of the faces I know and some of So Kurt Zimmerman, alcoholic, and Sam, thanks for letting me be a part of this. And I was thinking about earlier, what do I want to talk about? And I thought, well, you just talk about what stood out in this letter for me. And, I'll give you a little background. I came in my first AA meeting was February 1979. I was 22 years old. I didn't get sober till 1986. I didn't quit drinking. I got released from drinking. And that was a profound revelatory experience. I didn't know anything about revelatory experiences, but I knew I'd been released by something other than me. And in my mind, I called that, this must be what they're talking about, God. It just connected the dots. So I got involved in AA, and I worked the steps, and I sponsored guys, and I did the deal, and then I didn't do the deal because I got involved in all the stuff the book warns us about, ego, pomp, worship, other things. And in 19 years, I drank. And I love Chuck C's book where he says, the conflicts of sober reality became untenable. And I drank to preserve my sanity. And he said, the most baffling characteristic of alcoholism, both of the alcoholic and those who must deal with him, is the paradox in which the conflicts of sober reality become untenable. And untenable is really kind of a funny word, and through the help of some people in this meeting right now, when I realized after getting released 12 years ago, it was very clear in a deep surrender experience that what I'd been doing is I'd been managing my life with spiritual principles. And they weren't spiritual principles, they were my ego's interpretation of spiritual principles. And this is what's so great about this. See, when you don't know what you don't know until you know it, and an elder mirrors back to you what you're experiencing, you don't need to identify it. It identifies itself. It's like you go, oh, that's what it was. Like there's this kind of a aha. And the other thing I was thinking about before I get started in this is I heard an interview, or part of an interview with it was from Nelson Mandela, and it was unpublished tapes. And one of the things he says in these tapes was, he said, human beings only become human beings by other human beings. And when he said it, I thought, well, hell, that's AA. That's AA. You could say, well, it's not really AA, it's a spiritual path, right? And then the guy asked him a question, and the question was, he said, what did 28 years do, 28 years in prison do for you? And he said, well, when I came out, I was mature. And I thought, well, shoot, that's what AA does. We grow up here pretty much, or I did. Let me just speak for myself. Now, I turned 65 Saturday. I came in here when I was 22. And I'm telling you, I didn't do this thing, perfectly. That's for sure. I'm a successful failure here. I probably learned more from my mistakes. Those were bigger gifts, than successes. And the other thing I like to say is, and I really mean this, I mean this with all my heart, and you guys heard me say it before, I thank God I am not suffering from what's not happening anymore. That was a huge, huge obstacle in my ability to see what was really going on. Because I was listening to a narrative in my head that was based on the past, conditioning, belief systems, old ideas, trauma, what I told myself, what others told me, or projections into future events. That's what I mean by not happening. See, these things aren't happening. The only place they're happening was between my ears. And that, when that's going on, and when I'm listening to that, I am completely blocked from what's going on. And what's going on is in the present moment, right now, right here. And that's where I was all the time. I lived in that reality. And I think that reality is the bondage of self. I think that's exactly what self is. I think self, that self, it's not, JP will probably talk about, it's not a noun, it's a verb. It's, why would we say a prayer? God, please relieve me of the bondage of self if we couldn't be relieved of the bondage of self? Why would we be asking the Creator, Great Spirit? So what I thought was going on and what was going on was two totally different things. And it says it in our book. It says I'm a victim of a delusion, that I can rest satisfaction if I only manage well. And then, like I said, there's what if this thing doesn't need to be managed? What if it is completely unmanageable and I'm approaching it from the wrong direction? What if there are principles, laws, and values that are working perfectly and I'm out of sync with them? And this is what I was told. I was told these 12 steps are to bring you back into harmony with those principles, laws, and values. And that this was a way of living. Here they come. How about that? Linda Clint. That I was told that it was to bring me back into harmony with these principles, laws, and values. And if I did these steps and then practice these principles on a daily basis, that would be a possibility. So somehow I missed all that first 20 years. And I don't think I missed it. I don't think it was wrong. I don't think it was incorrect. I don't think I did anything wrong. I think I had to do everything in those 20 years to see that it wasn't that. Because it says it's all inclusive. And that's kind of what the book said too. It said, discover the obstacles. We got to discover the obstacles first. And a lot of the obstacles were a part in the book that said, by every form of self-deception, experimentation, I'll prove myself an exception to the rule. Therefore, not non-alcoholic, but really, therefore in control. The problem was I didn't know what those forms of self-deception, experimentation were going to look like till I experienced them. And so that's a little about me and what's happened with me. And so let me get back to the letter. It was interesting. It said there was two things that popped out. I mean, every time I read this, different stuff pops out. It said how to translate a right mental conviction into right emotional result, and so into easy, happy, and good living. Well, that's not only the neurotics problem. Oh, let me read you something out of Chuck C's book. And the symptoms of a sober alcoholic seem to be almost identical to those of an acute or intense neurotic. Let me read this again. A sober alcoholic seem to be almost identical to those of an acute or intense neurotic. These same A principles can be applicable to a great many additional lives. Here's the warning, though. But as stated again and again in this book, these principles must be used, and used is in italics. Not just evaluated, analyzed, or passively accepted. You know, I think that's a great statement. Neurotics problem. In the old days, we used to call them dry drunks. We'd say, well, don't get around Clinton. He's so dry. You light a match around him, he'll go up and torch. We would make statements like that, and that's what we were referring to. And I'm just using Clinton because he's sitting across the. I'm not implying anything, Clinton. So don't.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. So, because booze was my medicine. See, booze was my medicine. See, if this was a cup of Grey Goose, it would look like this. Yeah. All that irritable, restless discontentness would be start to subside, and I that narrative would kick in and go, you got bills to pay, and my response or reaction to that be, I'll worry about that later. You got to get the kids. Well, yeah, well, she'll deal with it. See, there was a piece, kind of a fake, and I think this is what Jung was talking about when Jung said spiritus contra spiritum. We use it depraving poison for the highest religious experience. So it was my medicine. And it was my medicine because I had this state of irritable, restless discontentness. Sober. I'll say that again, sober. And had it way before I drank. And when my medicine was gone, if I didn't replace it with something, this way of living, all the things we do here. But part of it was, and this was really big for me, I wasn't trying to integrate these principles in my life, in those 20 years. I was busy. Activity is not action. We hear that around here. And I was busy building a business and a family and kids, and I was married. And I think that's all normal stuff we do, I just did what we did, and got too far out on the limb, and it snapped. That's all. So this thing's I have a daily, I really get this, it says what we really have. And I put the emphasis on really is a daily reprieve. Every morning I go to the beach. That's how I start my deal. I got instructions on what to do. I'm supposed to ask God, direct my thinking, divorce from self-pity, dishonest, do all those things. And I don't mean just repeat that. I do this every morning. It's my deal. It's like I brush my teeth. It's just a way of living. It's an integrated way of living now. And if we get sideways, there's people in this group of 85 people that I could call. And so when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about, I hope are you timing me, JP? You got a timer?
I'm not timing you, but you've got 15 more minutes according to a calculation.
Okay, thanks.
I don't think there are any fixed lines here.
Okay, thanks. So here's what stood out. And this really stood out to me because I was in an emotional workshop about 10 years ago. And they had a PowerPoint presentation up on the wall. They were reading this thing, and they had all this stuff highlighted. And what stood out to me was what wasn't highlighted, and it stood out like a sore thumb. In the same way that the clarity about what was happening for 19 years stood out. That whole time I was just managing my life with my ego's interpretation of spiritual principles. It stood out this way. And it was this part in the book, and I'll just read it. And I kept asking myself, why wouldn't the 12 steps work to release my depression? By the hour, I stared at St. Francis Bird, better to comfort than be comforted. Here was the formula, all right, why didn't it work? So when I drank, and we went to the home group, one of the home groups we started, this was how I'd go to the meeting. And I think even Don, when we were up at Angel Fire, they brought me up there and I was drinking. And I think I was drinking when we did the boarding schools out in Riverside. I think I was drinking. I showed up. I just didn't show up sober. And I'd go to the meeting, our home group meeting. I'd go 30 minutes early, just like you guys instructed me. Except for I'd sit in the parking lot, open the cooler, and drink beer till the meeting started. And then when the meeting started, I'd go up in the meeting and I'd sit down and I'd be so drunk, it'd take me a minute to put a cup of coffee down. And when I'd stand up to go to the bathroom, I had to go down 2 flights of stairs. 5 or 6 guys that I sponsored would run and get in front of me and behind me so I didn't fall and break my neck. That's what it looked like. So I was showing up, but I couldn't get released. I couldn't set the bottle. I couldn't. And I had guys try to take me through the steps to release me. I had guys. Everybody was trying everything. And I'm really glad. I remember going in my bedroom and seeing an accordion of folders of amends I owed. And I turned around and walked out and grabbed a bottle of Grey Goose, went inside the backyard and drank half a bottle. I was not in the 9th step. It was too overwhelming. So all of that was important because what it did, it finally exhausted me. And I would read, you guys are familiar with this, but I'm going to read it for you somewhere. Since we, some of you guys are familiar with this, it says, when surrender is a tactic, it's just another means of control, another effort to impose your will on your disease. Surrender is beyond your power. If it weren't, you would have no need of a higher power. The genius of 12-step spirituality isn't that it teaches you to surrender, but that it exhausts you in the effort to surrender. So you last surrendering, and find yourself surrendered. See, and that was that, it's funny, this kind of Don said this to me one time. He said, it's kind of like when you fulfill certain conditions, you get the cookie. I'm like, what the hell does that mean? And it's kind of like that. It's kind of like you don't even know the conditions you got to, you don't even know the conditions you got to meet. It's just like, but it's like a door opens. And it's funny. And the other way it was given to me was this, and I love this, and I use it with guys, and it's very, he said to me, listen, it's kind of like this. He said, you're standing in a hallway, and you're standing there, and there's no doors. You're just a hallway. He said, all of a sudden, a door is going to appear. And he said, nobody can see that door but you. You got to walk down and go through that door. And I interpret that as, this is See, nobody can tell you that. That we can point to that in the program and in meetings and with metaphor. Nobody can tell you about that because that's between you and your relationship with the Creator. That's your relationship with the Spirit. It's kind of like Kristen, one time she said, I said, it's kind of like this. I've said, you want to know about God? Don't ask me about God. I said, because if you ask me about God, you're just going to get my relationship with God. If you want to know about God, spend time with God. However that, whatever that means to you. You know, however that speaks to you. We'll start there. So I read this because of this next paragraph I'm going to read in Emotional Sobriety. It says, suddenly I realized what the matter was. And when I saw that on the board, it wasn't highlighted. It just reflected an experience I had when I got released in my house. Suddenly I realized what the matter was. All of a sudden, I could see with some kind of clarity. I could see honestly, truthfully. It was just clear as a bell. And it was almost comical. It was revelatory. I'm not talking about intellectual information. I'm talking about revelatory. It was revelatory. There was like in William James, he says, truth identifies itself and doesn't need your help. It's true because it's true. And suddenly I realized what the matter was. So I read this, and I read it completely different the way Bill wrote it. I think, and God forbid, I'm not trying to knock Bill or anything. I'm just speaking from my own experience. I think he wrote it from the condition. I don't think he wrote it separate from the condition. He said, my basic flaw had always been dependence, almost absolute dependence on people or circumstances to supply me with prestige, security, and the like. Failing to get these things according to my perfectionist dreams and specifications, I had fought for them. And when defeat came, so did my depression. And that's not how I saw it when it was up on the board. I saw it like this. Self's basic flaw had always been dependence, almost absolute dependence on people and circumstances to supply self with prestige, security, and the like. Failing to get these things according to self's perfectionist dreams and specifications, self had fought for them. And when defeat came, so did depression. See, what I'd been identified as was the condition, and I didn't know it. And I would say we're not the condition. And until that was seen separately, that door I talked about, the possibility of free from it, was not available. And I thought, oh my God, this is friggin' crazy. But there was kind of a peace behind that. You know, I've heard Mary talk about this before, and I love it because the way she says it. We've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. Didn't say I got myself there. You have this kind of experience where you start to see in the later steps, you entered the world of the Spirit. And what does that look like if you never entered the world of the Spirit? I think if you read the promises articulate what that viewing platform looks like. You can look the world in the eye. You can be alone in perfect peace and ease. Your fears fall from you. I mean, it's very descriptive of what it looks like. Now, I don't think I was ever out of the world of the Spirit. but I was consciously unaware. And what happened with this was I became consciously aware that I entered the world of the spirit. And that's hell, that's why I was drinking. That's all I ever wanted. This existential crisis of unworthiness, I could never shake it. And I just think that's a bondage of self. I was trying to be free from self as self, and I didn't know it. And I think what he's writing about here, or for me, what he's writing about, let me just say it that way, is stage-specific phases he went through up to 22 years where he finally got to a place where, and I'll end with this and let JP have it. Nowadays, my brain no longer races compulsively. I kind of interpret that as I ain't suffering for what's not happening anymore. In elation, grandiosity, and depression, I have been given a quiet place in the bright sunshine. And for me, that's that unsuspected inner resource. It's not some anthropomorphic deity that's sitting up in the clouds that I grew up with. It's what it says on 55. This great reality is deep down within us. And I'm grateful every day. And I feel blessed to even be able on this meeting. Me and Don were talking the other day. He said, shit, you shouldn't be here. You should be dead. And I'm sure most of us feel that way, right? I mean, he said it was obviously divine intervention for you. And I was in total agreement. So thanks for listening. And JP, you got it.
Thank you, Kurt. And this is kind of a special meeting for me because I grew up with Kurt in the program. We shared the same sponsor, Joe Hawk, for a number of years, and I believe we were also influenced by some wonderful people, Don Pritz, Don Poyers, who's here, Mary Thayer. So this is kind of like a really, thank you, Sam, for asking me to share. It's very touching personally for me. And I'm also very grateful to Kurt because, during COVID, during all the lockdowns, his Friday meeting was a great support. And, his Friday meeting is also not an AA meeting. It's an AA. It's a meeting of AA people with the general focus of deepening spiritual understanding, experience with a slant on non-duality. And through his meeting, I actually ended up meeting my sponsor, who's his name's Bob, and he's 96 this year. He's 64 years in the program, and he also happens to be a non-duality teacher for the last 40 years, I believe. And, and that really, has had a profound impact on my understanding of the Big Book and certain interpretations of it. I think one of the wonderful things I remember early on in the text is it tells us, it's like we're free to interpret and understand the Big Book as we understand it in that moment, right? I think those of us that have been through the work, doing it once a year, every year, sort of have that experience of seeing new things every year, having a new understanding of it every year, a so-called deepening. And the deepening that's happened on this end has been very much through the glasses of non-duality, we can say, to use Chuck C's expression for lack of a better one. Kurt and I are totally on the same page, because I was going to read exactly the same line that he read from the letter. You know, I'll read a similar, I'll read a similar one. For my dependence meant demand, a demand for the possession and control of the people and the conditions surrounding me, right? Of course, I never questioned where that demand came from. I never questioned in my life, where did this wanting to have more come from? Where did this wanting to have ease and comfort 27 come from? Right? It just never occurred, of course, until I came to the program. And then it was about self, right? In the beginning, it was about self. Self was demonized. Self is a bad thing. And this program is designed to deflate the ego and somehow is meant to get rid of self. That was, let's say, the first 10 years in a way. And of course, with meditation, with spiritual growth, trying different practices, it was very interesting to see that I was not my thinking. I was not my thinking. I was not my feeling. I was not my wanting. That was already interesting, right? And it was really interesting because whenever I went through the steps again on an annual basis, whenever amends were finished, that sense of self seemed to change, and it felt as if something had changed. Right? I mean, it was really easy to go, well, remember back when you were stealing cigarettes in the supermarket to finance your habits, right? I mean, it was easy to compare and say, oh, it's better now. And it was always better. But what I also never questioned is why I would hit a wall after a year after year after year after year. And it was just assumed that it's meant to be like that. This is the spiritual life. This is the spiritual path. After a year, you're meant to have a tune-up, an overhaul sometimes. And I love Don C's 4 seasons. Definitely relate to the 4-year cycle, the 16-year cycle. Yes, and but I never questioned, why is it that at the end of every year I need to go back through this stuff, right? I mean, I just assume this is how it is. And so I'd like to read a paragraph from page 62 from the big book, because I guess I must have read it, but I never really saw it. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making, right? They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of the selfishness. We must, or it kills us. God makes that possible. And this is the line that jumped out. And there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. It says entirely getting rid of self. It doesn't say ego deflation. It doesn't say fiddling with self. It doesn't say changing self. It doesn't say trying to use God to remove the character defects that I don't think are good and replacing them with assets which I believe are better. It says entirely rid of self, entirely getting rid of self. And when I saw that, it was like, yes, right, that's right. It's like all these decades, there's been a demonizing of self. There's been a trying to have a better experience with self. There's been, a lot of practices, a lot of time seeing how self can have a better experience with self. But never was it questioned whether there is a self or not, right? And definitely there was many decades of self relying on self to try to get out of self. And what I mean by that, and I'm sure some of you, relate, is that, this just doesn't feel comfortable in its own skin. I don't know at what age. Some people say at the age of 2. Some people say that at the age of 2 is when the sense of self-awareness or self-consciousness comes. And with that sense of self-awareness comes separation, right? I used to believe that it was my alcoholism. I used to believe it was the alcoholism that made me feel separate. But I now know that's not the case, because I've heard many non-alcoholics share exactly the same thing, feeling separate, right? Not at 1, 2, me and you, me and life, me and this world, right? And then it becomes, now it's me having to learn how to manage and deal with this thing called life, which, for this particular alcoholic, it didn't work very well. Fortunately, I'd say luckily, actually, in a way, right? And so, so this me, comes out of nowhere, because it wasn't like at the age of 2, I decided I'm going to be a me and I'm going to feel separate from the world. And I'm going to spend my life trying to manage life and myself also, and you and all my circumstances, and when that doesn't happen well, I get depressed, and then I have to drink and use, and then it just keeps going, right? And then what I also saw actually is pretty much I did the same thing, or the same thing happened more accurately, when I came into the spiritual life in AA. Right? It was, I'm going to use AA, and I think Mary Thea is the one that helped me to see this clearly. I saw AA in the program as an event, right? I saw the program as something I could use to try to reduce the sense of me, the separation, to reduce the restless, irritable discontent, right? And then when it didn't work, what would I do? I just go through it again. Right? Or I do some more meditation, some more practice. I don't know if you guys relate to this one. I'll just try harder. I'll try harder because I didn't do it thoroughly enough, right? I didn't write my resentments down last night. I missed my meditation this morning, and I shouldn't. There were like a lot of should and shouldn'ts, right? Which is just kind of like suffering. Should and shouldn't is just suffering, right? Because there's only what is. There is no such thing as should or shouldn't. There's only what is. You can't should or shouldn't what is. What is just is. And so, there was a lot of seeking. There was a lot of spiritual seeking. There was a lot of spiritual fixing. There was a lot of, and I believe the letter also alludes to this, there was a lot of absolute reliance on the program, people in the program. And again, I didn't see this, but there was absolute reliance on me doing the program. I couldn't see that. It couldn't be seen. For decades, it couldn't be seen that there was a lot of reliance on me doing the program. And page 62 is really clear. Me is the problem. The root of my troubles is my self-centeredness. My self-centeredness is me. It's not me and self, because that's also two. That's also a separation. Oh, me and self, I'm going to defeat self. I'm going to rely on the program to reduce self. No, it's not me and self, it's me. I'm the problem. Me, myself, I. I think I'd hear old timers talk a lot about that. Me, myself, and I. This is the problem. And I was relying on this to do the spiritual seeking. not knowing I was doing it, of course, and you know, and I think that line from page 62, you know, we usually don't think we're doing self-will run riot. I mean, that kind of describes it, right? There wasn't a knowing that I was relying on myself to do this program. And so no wonder it was like I would be, self would give me a leash, or the me would give me, you know, a friend would say, you know, the me gave you a break, right? During that year, the me would give me a break. It would, you know, release its grasp for a while, so there could be an experience of, oh, things are really better, right? And then the rage would come back, right? Then I'd start to shout at the taxi driver again for no reason, you know, and I wouldn't be able to answer my wife calmly, right? The rage would be back after 6 months, after 9 months, whatever it took, right, to hit that wall again. And so there was, you know, there really was, with my current sponsor, what he helped me to see is me is the problem, and the illusion is me, right? Then there, you know, me is not really real. It feels real. Everyone will tell me it's real. Yes, of course you're real, JP, you're real. The thing about the me is it's real and unreal at the same time. It's not real. It's real and unreal at the same time. And of course, the mind can never wrap itself around that. It's just not possible, right? We're talking about the prosaic steel girder here, right? It's like when you see the prosaic steel girder, you'll say, that's a steel girder. Don't tell me it's not real. But science tells you it's not real. It's real and unreal at the same time. It's basically space. It's empty. There's nothing there. Space is empty. The prosaic steel girder is empty, right? It appears as if it's real. There's no denying the appearance. And there's no denying that self appears to be real. Absolutely. Absolutely. It appears to be very real. This is why there's such a great reliance on it, because it seems real. And who's relying on it is self. It's just like, you know, Kurt was saying at the end of his share, you know, it's like self has been relying on self to try to get out of self so self can enjoy ease and comfort. It's crazy. It's totally crazy, but that's what's going on, right? It's just like when you look in the mirror, you can't say your face isn't in the mirror. It is and it isn't. You can't say it's not there and you can't say it's there. It's the same thing with self. You can't say it is and you can't say it isn't. And that's really when, you know, this line of about being entirely rid of self started to make some sense, right? Only God can make this happen. Of course, self can't make this happen. Self is stuck with self. It doesn't matter how much effort self makes, it's always going to end up with me. It doesn't matter how elevated spiritually self goes, it's still going to end up with me. Self is still going to be there. I mean, you know, on this end, you know, it's like I've experienced even self seeing that there is no self, but that is still self. I mean, you know, this story of spiritual growth, self can grow spiritually. The spirit is just spirit. There is no growth for spirit. In the fourth dimension, there is no growth. There is no going somewhere. In the realm of the spirit, there's only this, right? And so spiritual growth is for self. It's kind of like, supercharged self-improvement. That's what spiritual growth is for self. It's boosted self-improvement, right? In the realm of the spirit, there is no improvement. There is no good or bad. There is no right or wrong. There is no time. There is no space. In fact, there's no one. There's only spirit. God is everything. Where is there any room for someone separate from God? Right? So, this line, being entirely rid of self, it kind of helped me to see that actually, the AA program is really right on the way. Because this page, it's prior to step 3. And it's, for me, now a pointer to what the program is really meant to point to, right? It's a set of directions, so to speak, that allow an awakening to be entirely rid of self. Not for a self to grow spiritually and to be, really good at doing the work and really good at catching its thoughts, because who's catching the thoughts, right? And for what? I mean, of course, for the me, it always wants to have a better experience. That's what the me is about. The me is about, I'm gonna ask God to remove this feeling so I can have a better feeling. Or so I can be at peace, so I can be neutral, so I know what to do. Because of course, for the me, knowing is its biggest drug. For the me, knowing is its security. Knowing is what allows the me to continue this sense of existence. I know something. I know something important. I know something deep. I know something spiritual, right? So with that, the me has a sense of security and power. Knowing, I don't mean knowledge. I'm not talking about intellectual knowledge. I really mean knowing. Knowing is the me's or self's biggest drug, right? I mean, old timers would say, and I would always remember them because I would never get it back then. It's like, old timers would say, well, the more time I have, the less I know. Now it makes complete sense. Because knowing is just self-reliance. I'm going to rely on what I know. And I'm going to use that to feel better, to have a better experience with life, to control my life better. And in the spiritual case, I will use my knowing to have a better relationship with God. Right? But there is no such thing as a relationship in the world of the spirit. There isn't two. There isn't a me and God. There's only God. So who's trying to have the relationship? Right? There's only God. Pretty clear. God is everything or nothing. Actually, he's both. Because if he's everything, of course, it has to include nothing, right? Otherwise, then he wouldn't be everything. He would be limited. So God is everything, which includes nothing. I'm not talking about nothing of the mind. I'm talking about emptiness. And so, yeah, this line on page 52, it really jumped out, and it really, helped me to see a different aspect. And of course, with a lot of help from my sponsor. And it doesn't change at all the love I have for this program. They're still working with other people here. And it's just that it's no longer about we're going to get somewhere better than here. It's about this already. Whatever's happening already is God being everything. You know, it's not about, well, one day when you finish your amends, you're going to be okay. You know, it's not about that anymore. It's also, and for me, I used to be, a service junkie, and my sense of self would also be dependent on how many sponsees I had. That's completely gone, right? Because there isn't anything that's wrong. There isn't anything that needs to be fixed, edited, improved on. There's no one that needs to be helped. That doesn't mean that helping doesn't come by itself, but I'm not the one that's doing it. It's pretty clear that for me, that it's God doing it, because that's all there is. So yeah, it's been a very different experience. When I meet with my sponsees, and some of them are here, and I hope that, I think most of them know already, I have no idea what's going to come out of my mouth. There's no plan. Absolutely none. Right? It's because there isn't a me to control this. Right? The me that would control it, for the first, for a couple of decades, it was pretty messy stuff. There'd be a lot of firing, both ends. There'd be a lot of frustrating. Why are they doing what I want them to do? If they did what I wanted them to do, they'd be much happier. Right? None of that. It's like, I have no idea what's going on. And sometimes be an a-hole as well. I actually ask my permission of my sponsees if I can be. Because this is not about being a saint. Of course not. Being a saint is still in the 3 dimensions, right? Yeah, there's no one here to be anywhere. So whatever happens is just whatever happens. Right? What I love that expression in Zen, no face and 1,000 face. There's the freedom to be just whatever the spirit manifests as. Now, here. And so, of course, the writing still happens. I love fifth steps. Sometimes we spend an hour on one resentment, because it's not, we have to get somewhere exercise. Whatever the spirit wants to show us is what is shown, right? Fear inventory, really important. That one single question, why do I have this fear? I mean, that's the key question. Why do I have this fear? And not like, well, why do I have this fear? And then reading the next sentence. Because then the whole thing is skipped, right? Why do I have this fear? A friend here, she's looking at about 100 fears, and with each fear, spending time in the day looking at, why do I have this fear? Why do I have this fear? Right? Text inventory, vision, as Don Coyers would teach us, and then really, eventually coming to the realization that there is no time. So if there's no time, how can there be vision as well? Not that there's anything wrong with vision, but if there's no time, how can there be vision? So if there's any vision, it's just this. It's just this, and this, and this, and this, and spirit manifests in this, through this. Right? If there's a vision, that's the only vision I can see today. It doesn't mean I don't plan my holidays. I love planning my holidays. And, 6 and 7, one of the questions that came up is, who is it that is deciding what a defect is? Right? Who's deciding what a defect is? And it was kind of seen that, well, that's self, isn't it? Who says what's good and bad, right and wrong, selfish and unselfish? Who decide? Who gets to judge that and decide that? So, and it's. I mean, I'm not saying to go be nasty to your neighbor. That's not what I'm saying. But it was just a question: who's deciding what's good and bad and right and wrong? And of course, amends are also made. And the most important thing being that I'm not the one that decides when to make the amend, how to make it. Just amends are made, and they're made the way they're made. You know, sometimes there are those questions that we ask. Sometimes there's not. Sometimes there's a deciding to, you know, make an appointment, and sometimes there isn't. For example, last year, my amends to my wife was made at New Year's lunch with absolutely no intention to make it at New Year's lunch. You know, so, but amends are made, but not by me. I'm not in control because there is no me to control this. There's only spirit. So yeah, I hope this is not too confusing, but this is just what's happening over here. And I'm eternally grateful for all of you. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Well, it was deep. Some good stuff. Thank you, JP and Kurt. What a great meeting. You know, one thing that you said, I'm not going to ask too many questions because there's a lot of people on here that I want to hear from. But, you know, one of the things that you said last time, JP, that I thought was really fascinating and that I really tried to use with this family this last week is being love instead of offering love. Like you can only be love. Could you expand on that a little bit or maybe talk about that for a second?
Yeah, being love rather than offering love. So, you know, the love that I used to know before was a feeling. It was a feeling, and then it was also a concept. You know, kind of like Saint Francis' prayer in a way, right? It's for me, it's kind of like a concept, and it's a set of instructions for someone to do those things. So I'm going to give you love instead of demanding love. But what's not said also is if I do that, then I'm also going to, there's also an expectation to get something back, right? Right? It's kind of like a business deal, right? I mean, I'm sure Saint Francis didn't write it with that intention. You know, it's like there are a lot of like spiritual teachings that are actually descriptive rather than prescriptive. And I didn't know that. I thought that everything was prescriptive. If I read a spiritual document or whatever, I thought these are instructions for me to do it. They're not. They're descriptive. It's a description of the fourth dimension. It's a description of what happens when someone, so to speak, is already in the fourth dimension. This is how it is. Someone, there's no one, right? But someone who's living in the fourth dimension, they give naturally rather than receive because nothing is missing. There is nothing missing to have to make a business deal to give love in order to receive it because they're already loved. Love, not in the sense of the feeling, but in the sense of unconditionally, I'm really hesitating to use the word accept, but, you know, unconditionally accepting, let's say, because what is just is, that's unconditional acceptance. What is already is, this is unconditional love already. No one has to do anything. It already is this way, already. So this is already unconditional love. This meeting is unconditional love. There is nothing which is not unconditional love, right? There is nothing, no one that can go, what is wrong, because what is just is. Every part of it, every face, every so-called person, everything already is. This is unconditional love already. So it's not a me that's love, because that would again be a me. It's everything already is unconditional love, including this sense of me. Because unconditional love, of course, is all inclusive, as the book says, right? Never exclusive, all inclusive, unconditional love. So I hope that answers that question.
That's perfect. And the next one I had was for Kurt. You know, is there anything that you wish you could change about yourself, or any stubborn dependency that you still have that you need to surrendering? And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah. I have this one thing that bothers me. One thing, but as far as experience and all that, no, I wouldn't change a thing. But I have a tendency to be dismissive sometimes, and that's not acceptable. I have a tendency to, and I've had that for a long time. And I think a lot of it plays out, a lot of this plays out when I was younger, and I would try to articulate what was going on with me, and I'd be shut down. And I think it has a tendency with that. But I think a lot of this is just growth. I mean, it's been my experience that will be resolved through the life experiences. It says in our book, it provides what we need if we keep close to it. So that's a promise. So I rely on that. I don't spend a lot of time with it. I try to be consciously aware of it when it's triggered. And I'm just immensely grateful. I just really, it's like, it kind of ties into what JP just said. The effect of waking up, let's just, we're using language. The effect of waking up in the world of the spirit is giving. It's an effect. Gratitude is an effect of that, right? It's like there's a guy, there's a saying, I like this saying that Ramana said, JP's familiar with it. He said, he was asked a question one time, how do we treat others? And his answer was, there are no others. And I think that's what JP was saying. Yeah. So thanks, Sam.
Kurt, would you call on a couple people and then JP?
Well, is there anyone who'd like to share? Was that your hand, Tom?
No, there's two hands up.
Oh, there is. Sorry. Let me
I'm
look.
Joanna. I'm an alcoholic. I look like a dog, but I'm actually a person. Well, I'm nothing according to you, but I'm a person more than I'm a dog. I really, really appreciate what both of you had to say, and I'm with you there. And I feel to me the steps are the answer to most of the things, and it's not the It's the practice, it's the doing of it. And our 12 steps says clearly, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. And to me, that's a very powerful promise. And I can attest to you that I've experienced that. Now I have a couple of 24 hours, actually quite a few, but you know, whatever, that doesn't matter. The point is that it's been very helpful to us to live these steps. Now, I don't have a good concept of God because but the point is that I liked what your definition was and JP's. That was a very good, it's either everything or it's nothing. You know, I get it. It's very nice. I really appreciate what you guys had to say. And it really informed my program and allowed me to, well, first of all, it allowed me to feel like I'm on the right track, which is ego, but we won't go there. So anyways, it's just, I mean, I do think, so one of the things I believe in is that, yes, the third step tells us, let go of the bondage of self. And I do believe that. However, I also believe that if you don't have a true self to let go of, what the hell are you letting go of? And you can get into serious trouble if you don't discover who you are before letting go of what I do believe we have to let go of it. I'm there with you, but I do believe that, I also believe that we have to figure out who our true self is, not our ego self, because that gets us into trouble all the time, but our true self. If we don't know who we are, it's a lot harder to let go of that. And it's a lot more, I don't know what the word is, but it just makes it problematic in my book. So I think knowing who we are is better, and we can then let go of it. I mean, I do believe that we need to traverse that. It's the final goal is not to have a true self. The final goal is to let go of it all. And, you know, for me, the steps allow me to practice some of these. Like step 3, one of the things I like to practice or to live every day is not knowing, which you guys talked about. Not knowing, trusting, and surrendering. And to me, that's a very profound spiritual experience. I mean, that's just the step 3. I mean, there's also step 1, which tells me I'm a limited human. And guess what? I can make mistakes, which is amazing to me because I didn't think I could or wasn't allowed. So, you know, I think our steps are very helpful. And, you know, step 2 is the step of hope. There is always a spiritual solution. We may not see it all the time, but there's always a spiritual solution. So there is a solution. That's very helpful to me. Anyways, thank you both for illuminating this meeting and for giving me new ideas. So thank you. I appreciate it. Oh, I was going to ask, I don't know if you or JP or both are feel comfortable with sharing either a phone number or an email. But if you are and put it in chat, I would very much appreciate it.
Yes, I shared my WhatsApp and iMessage in the chat. If anyone wants to contact or chat, you're more than welcome.
Kurt, would you like to call on one more person? Anybody in there that you see that you'd maybe like to hear from before we open her up? You're on mute, broski. Hey, Kurt, you're still muted.
How about now?
Yeah, you're good there.
Whoever would like to share, there's a couple hands up. Twyla's hands up, and somebody else's hands are up.
Take it away, Twyla. You're on mute, Twyla. You got to unmute yourself.
Unmute, dude. Twyla.
Hold on. Hey, Twyla, you're still muted. You ever find the? There you go.
Thank you very much. My name's Twyla, I'm an alcoholic, and I am beyond grateful to be on this meeting right now. And I appreciate everything I've heard. I'm going to have to listen to the recording to get the full meeting today. And I'm grateful for the recording part of this too. The reason I raised my hand is because this all really resonated with me. Everything that you said, JP, and I'm going to be very nice to hear what everything Kurt had said, but the best thing for me tonight is what I came to me during this meeting is that I'm looking at is all well with my soul? How is my soul doing? That for me is the bottom line. How is my soul today? Is it all well with my soul? And I can honestly say today, all is well with my soul. And I believe that is only because I am able to continue to have the relationship with God, who I can talk with. I know he's there every minute of my day. And yesterday, day before yesterday, I was in an intense situation where I was involved in I had to leave my home immediately because of an incident where someone was in my home with a gun wanting to kill themselves. And that person is my life partner of 24 years. He does not have a program. He's not one of us, but he does have a lot of issues from his whole life. He's 74 that he's never come to terms with. And I really believe that's part of what's going on. And I have total faith that he is going to be healed and we will go on in this life. When I had to walk out of my house with my hands up and I knew he was behind me, I knew he had a gun in his pocket. I said, you're not going to shoot me and you're not going to shoot yourself. And God loves you, Jesus loves you, and you know that. So with that being said, I am safe. I'm not dead. I'm safe. And I believe that the best is yet to come. And again, all is well with my soul tonight. I have to keep practicing. I have to keep talking with and communicating with my higher power, God. And that's what I have for tonight. Thank you all so very much.
Sarah?
Hi, everyone. Sarah, alcoholic. Wow, that was really deep. There was a couple of things, Kurt and JP, that really resonated with me. And I kind of lost track of who said what, but a couple of the things that really jumped out at me was the thing about the should and the shouldn't. Love that. Should and shouldn't is suffering. You can't should or shouldn't what is. That's pretty cool. I think that was JP. And I just got done done sharing, in a meeting about, I was doing a big book study with a couple of people, and I just got done sharing about don't should on me. Just don't should on me, and so that one really got me. But the other one that really jumped out at me was the one about just be. And, we have that line in the big book that talks about it's in the fear prayer, in the fear inventory. And it says, God, please remove my fear and direct my attention to what you would have me be. And you can take fear out of that and put any other word in there, any other kind of negative kind of emotion or whatever's going on in your life, and put it in there and ask God to remove it and direct my attention to what you would have me be. And when, like in the past, in the past 9 months or so that, since my husband passed away, that has come up over and over and over again, that it's not what I have to do, it's what I have to be. And so that was really profound for me and really hit home with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I believe we had a friend from New Jersey who wanted to share a minute ago, had her hand up.
Roseanne.
Roseanne.
Oh,
Roseanne,
I'm
are you
Roseanne.
there?
I'm here. I wasn't sure what time the meeting ended, but thank you both. I'm an alcoholic. And I was like, whoa, this is something you know, I had to look up duality. I had to Google it because I had no idea what you're talking about. And a lot of this stuff went over my head, but I think I kind of get the gist of it. But I have to easy does it, you know, because I could go like way off the board. But I know you know, because I hear self and I hear false self and then I hear ego and then I'm like all this junk, and I could get myself really confused. All I know is that I love the just be, but I know that there's a program of action, and if I don't do certain things, like because you were like talking about like do the program, because I could get like that too. I could judge myself what I'm not doing and things like that. But I think some of those things are signs that, you know what, I am slacking off. You know, or like maybe something speaking to me, like God saying, you know, whatever helps, you know, a person get better. I'm just wondering what you do if you're not doing it, you know, anything. I know you're just being, but we have to take some kind of action, you know, and we're giving like, it's a program of action. So I'm just getting a little like confused. I know God's doing the work, but we have to take some kind of action, you know, but we're not responsible for like the outcome. You know, it's like God's working while we take the steps to do it. So I'm just, you know, I just like to hear what you have to say about that.
I think this is like a really typical question, like for someone in step one. It's like, if I'm powerless, does that mean I'm going to sit on the couch and do nothing forever? But really, you know, who's beating your heart? Who's pumping the air in your lungs? Are you creating your next thought? Right? So it's not to say that there aren't any decisions, but decisions happen with no one to make them. Right? Things happen without anyone managing them. It's just kind of like driving your car. Are you really driving your car when you drive your car? I mean, that's kind of like a real obvious example for me. It's like, how did I get back home? Right? It's like there was no one there driving the car, but I'm back home, right? So, I mean, all of these are just pointers that, you know, it's like there doesn't need to be anyone to control anything for life to happen, because life just is. Life just happens. God just is. I mean, the way the book talks about this is, you know, God does for us what we can't do for ourselves, because there isn't anyone. Right? This is all God doing what he's doing. You can call it life, you can call it God, you can call it spirit, you can call it now. I mean, those are just words, right? The words are not the thing. Yeah, but I understand the confusion. You know, it's like the me is going to say, well, if I don't do it, it's not going to get done. You know, who has to go and make a living? If I don't, you know, it's very nice for you guys to get all spiritual, but if I don't do this and that, I'm not going to have, you know, a food to put on the plate. That's just fear. That's just a story. It's just has nothing to do with what is real.
Well, I think one of the confusing things for a lot of people, JP, I think, you know, like when you went through your talk, and obviously when Kurt went through his talk, you talk about how you go through the steps once a year and you have practices and you go to certain meetings on Friday. I mean, there's certain things that certain disciplines or spiritual tools that have been used and utilized in both our lives, but it's kind of, or in both your lives, but it's kind of like you get these things where, you know, self is using spiritual principles to try and manage self to out, you know, to get relief from the bondage of self so that it can feel peaceful and comfortable. And it's got some really thorny character defects that are really showing up all over the place. And I keep doing all this stuff and working with others. And then one day, one of them just falls right off. Just like the obsession to drink, you know, that position of neutrality. And then you realize, like, I didn't do anything about direct action towards not drinking. I don't obsess about it anymore. It's the same thing, you know, with all these other things, but yet I have this demand that I need to be a specific way in order for me to be more spiritually enlightened, so that you will approve and respect of that, or you know, so that I can feel good all the time. But you know, it was interesting that you read, Kurt, and I read this, we read this every week, and it is so into easy, happy, and good living. It's easy if I don't have to have an opinion about it, to just enjoy it. You know, it's like Tom always says, like, what if it's easy? So what a great meeting. Thank you both so much. And I wish we had 3 more hours with you.
Hey, Sam,
Yeah.
I can't type. I haven't figured out how to do it. I got a big monitor and I can't figure out how to use my keyboard. Could
Yeah.
somebody put my phone number in there, or email? Or I think Ray's on here, if Ray could do it.
Ray, can you do it? My phone just died next to me, so I don't have the stuff on there. And then also, could somebody post the recordings to the Dropbox? We have a recording. And, you know, this has become a great family, a great spiritual workshop. It's helped, you know, our group conscious decided that there's a lot of people that wanted to continue to participate in this. So, and it kind of got me fired up. So we've got a good lineup this next month. And we've got another great host. It's not going to be me hosting every day, so you don't have to worry about that. I won't talk the whole time. We've got Joel has agreed to take it over for January, so that'll be exciting, and he'll have a good roster of folks and good questions. And why don't we go to our, but you know, I think I say, you know, all of us who've come to this regularly have a profound sense of gratitude for each other after, you know, coming here and having the opportunity to be with each other. So thank you. And thank you so much, JP. Thank you so much, Kurt, for both your friendship and your participation in this. And we'll just go to our inner room and close with the Lord's Prayer, or whatever prayer you'd like to say to yourself on mute. God, man, sometimes I'm honestly not in the mood for like a really long meeting. You know, I'm like, oh shit, I got to do this Thursday meeting. It's an hour and a half. The group conscious wanted to keep it an hour and a half, and this is going to be forever. And then it just zips right by.
And
Thank
it's
you,
worth every
guys.
minute.
Thank you, Kurt.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, JP.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Kurt.
Kurt.
Thanks, everyone.
Love you
Good to
guys.
see you all.
Thanks.
Thank you.
very much. That
everybody.
was
Thank you,
great.
appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Kurt. Thank you, JP.
Thank you.
Thanks,
And Jana,
JP.
thank you for putting the Dropbox. If you look in the chat, some people have asked that the Dropbox link to all the recordings, and this recording should be uploaded in the next couple of days.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate you.
Thanks, Sam.
Hey, Twyla, thanks for your share, and we'll be praying for you. And we're glad you're here, and really glad
Thank
you opened
thank
up with us.
so
You
much.
know, our hearts are with you tonight.
Yes,
I appreciate that. I know that. Thank you very much.
definitely, Twyla. We'll be praying for you and your husband.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
All
everybody.
prayers-
See you next week.
I want
See
to.
you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone. Thanks, Kurt. Good to see you again, JP.
Joanna, Dennis, good to see you. Glad y'all came with us. Good share tonight. I appreciated all your insight. Thank you, Joanna.
Thank you,
very
Sam.
much.
We
Great meeting.
appreciate your meeting and your willingness to make it happen. So thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Great
JP,
meeting.
thank you,
It's
Kurt.
very inspirational to me.
I love it.
And yeah, it's to both
Just
of
what I
us.
needed to hear
Yeah.
today.
Dennis has a saying which I think you might appreciate. Only the Buddha could be Buddhist and only Christ could be Christian. I mean, it's you have to take it with, it's not a literal thing. You have to take it as an allegory, but I think
Yeah.
we all have responsibility to create a path for ourselves.
I
And
can't walk Bill and Bob's path. I have to take what they gave me and walk my own.
Yeah, yes, we follow direction, but that doesn't mean that we make it our own. It's like you eating a sandwich. It doesn't become your blood and your cells until you digest it. And I feel the same about the steps. So that's how I see it. But what do I know?
Thanks much.
I'm just.
I agree. Thank you guys so much for being a part of it. We
Thank you.
appreciate you, and y'all have a great night.
Thank
Maggie,
you.
thank you for hosting. Much love to you all, and we'll catch you next week.